Good morning, everyone. I have been asked to make sure that everybody that has arrived from a foreign country is happy with the speed of my speech this evening. So there are many people now that are nodding with me with headphones on, which is fantastic, just to make sure the translators in the booths here are working. And if I can just make sure by asking them to continue to translate elephant, lamppost, beer pump, sludge valve, nipple, underwear, dogging, 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 dogging. Sorry, shanning French, if that helps at all. Okay, excellent. Just one more final test of translation, just to make sure that if I point to this side of the room, and some of you know what's coming, could you please clap once to make sure you understand. When I point this side of the room, only to my right, your left, clap once when I point at you. Okay, so not everyone's picking that up. Again, this side of the room, when I point at you, clap once loudly together. Very glad. This side of the room, if I'm speaking slowly enough, could you stamp both feet on the ground together twice when I point at you, just to prove the translators are making it work. So when I point at you with this hand, could you stamp twice on the floor when I point? Very good. So whatever happens, keep that going, please. Translators, you're still up to speed with this? Excellent, you're nodding as well. Dogging, good. Whatever happens when I point, do exactly that. So stamp twice when I point. Very good. We will. Rocky, fantastic stuff. I have been in publishing for 27 years. Microphone. Thank you very much. Did he hit? Is that? Did he hit? May we have one more? Still no microphone? Nope. What does this mean in an international language? Go away. Could somebody from the sound people help me with the microphone? Excellent. Hello, can you hear me? Oh yes, it's working. Excellent, thank you. You're clapping me for just plugging it in. Brilliant. What I want, and then later on, always thinking, just making sure I'm in charge. I have been in publishing or been in media for 25 years. I spent 10 years working at News International, running the marketing of some of their newspapers and running their early voicemail detection center. I then spent a number of years running Mirror Group newspapers, where I met many of my colleagues here. And I've run different television companies and also magazine companies. And I have been invited to Distripress around the world, either as a delegate or more recently as a keynote speaker. And each time, whilst my team have gone, I have decided not to go. But I've chosen to accept today for two reasons when I first got asked for my first ever Distripress to actually attend. Firstly, I do now run, for the first time, a newspaper and magazine business. And having run television companies and separately newspaper companies and separately magazine companies, to come at the peak of the digital revolution at a time when my company is facing so many challenges, I thought it would be interesting to share with you my observations of this very exciting but very frightening time for us as publishers and as distributors. So that was the first reason I decided to come. Stay away from me. Stay away from me. You are literally what my mother warned me about when I was a lot younger. That really, you genuinely are frightening me now. A little bit of we has just come out of me. Did you translate? A little bit of we just came out of me. That's absolutely brilliant. Could you nod again, just so I can say, you really did translate a little bit of we. That's fantastic. We'll be fine. Please don't be cross with me. No, I'm fine. It's all good. Thank you. If she comes back, will you warn me? Because none of you told me she was coming up the stairs. I turned round, and there was quite a scary lady there. So the first reason is I wanted to meet with you and share some of the exciting journey that we are going through as a publisher, like many of you are. And the second reason is because I now run a Scottish company. I am Scottish. I live in Scotland. So for me, for the first time in 25 years of being asked to come to Distripress, I live in the second rainiest city in all of the United Kingdom. So when I said yes to becoming the keynote speaker, I thought for the first time in 20+ years I would take the opportunity of choosing to come and speak at a Distripress conference because I didn't know which glamorous, beautiful, hot location it would be when I said yes. I now find that I have driven from the second rainiest city in the UK to come to the most rainiest city in all of Europe, which is a little disappointing. But the good news is there is 0 chance of skin cancer, which is fantastic. And many of you have never had deep-fried fruit before, so welcome to the cultural experience of Scotland. It is a very, very challenging time for our industry. And it's interesting to me, as somebody that has attended many conferences over media over the years, and to also look at the notes of previous Distripress conferences, to hear so many publishers for so many years now talk about the challenges and the opportunities of the digital revolution. The internet and the challenges and the opportunities to publishers, to print publishers, has been talked about. The first time it was talked about was 17 years ago in a conference. And as each year has gone on, people are spending more and more time talking about the challenges, more and more time talking about the opportunities, more and more time talking about the threats. But as I stand here today, at the end of 2012, 15 years after this is being debated, the most that virtually any decent-sized media print publisher has enjoyed from digital revenues as a result of the internet revolution is no more than 10% of their incumbent business. That is not to suggest that the 90% is not indeed going down. The threats as a result of the digital revolution have clearly decimated the confidence that we have had as publishers, in my company's case, for 147 years. We are running around confused, surprised, frightened, and in many cases, cautiously optimistic that we can migrate our audiences, our money, online. But it's important to remember that fact that despite this enormous proliferation of devices and investment that many of us have spent hundreds of millions of pounds collectively investing in the opportunities to migrate our print brands, the most that any of us are doing is migrating up to 10% of our existing print income online. And I will become an extremely enthusiastic evangelist for the digital opportunities. But we need to keep some perspective, my lovelies, because the industry that we represent is unquestionably going through a huge amount of challenge. But that challenge brings with it an enormous amount of opportunity. If you prospect recklessly and migrate all of your opportunities online and damage the very revenues that give us the privilege of paying our salaries and keeping our customers informed and entertained and delighted at the moment, then we will damage the very reason that we are able to enjoy the brands today. So I do think there are some fantastic opportunities, but please do not allow anybody to stand on this stage and say it happened in the music industry and it happened in the film industry, so it will happen in print. It is not true. I worked in the music industry for a couple of years. I ran a television and record label around the world a couple of years ago. And it was clear that the music industry that was richer and more powerful than us did in 5 years have its entire business model decimated by the internet. It is very simple. It's not a difficult business model to understand. It is simple. The joy of music is to let it play in your ears. And if there is a much more efficient or free way of finding that simple audible experience, then you will blow up the business model and the technology around buying a record or buying a CD or buying a tape. So it is easy to understand that the internet represents pretty much an outrageous threat to anybody involved in the business of music, except for a few artists and a few labels. Because we have disintermediated, I would love to see how you do with that one, the privileges between having big infrastructure and being a dominant player with high barriers of entry. Anyone with an internet connection become a rock star or can become a record label. So it's decimated it. Exactly the same transition is happening with films, mainly because of piracy. But the same principle has happened. At the end of the day, the simple joy and experience of watching a film or watching a television program is by looking at a screen and having pictures and things go in your ear. What we do with our brands is slightly different. It is more sensual, it is more elegant, and frankly, because we have invested in journalism, in pictures, in beauty, and in making the people that are passionate about our subjects of newspapers and magazines thrilled is because we are delivering it them in a fairly effective medium. And the transition across a screen, whilst it is still relatively appealing for some, if we make sure that we do not cannibalize our model too quickly, we'll still live and breathe for many, many years by finding a tree, cutting it down, squishing it flat, smearing ink all over it, and driving it around the countryside into wholesalers who then get it to retailers 1, 2, or sometimes 7 days later. There is still massive optimism that if we protect and we're responsible, then we've got a vibrant and exciting industry for not just years, but in some cases decades to come. I run a family-owned business. It's a private company with no debt, an enormous balance sheet, and they do not worry about next quarter's profits. They do not worry about next year's annual reports. They worry about their next generation of grandchildren to give them a job in the media. I am the first non-family chief executive that they have ever had. And it is my job to steer them through the waters of opportunity and adversity that can happen as a result of print. 1 month before I joined that company, some 17 months ago, the family chose to write out checks to Goss for £30 million, or if you want to call it in euros, 9 billion euros, to give the current exchange rate. Thank you, Europe. I liked the idea of a single currency, but I think it should be a pound. Should have listened to us all those years ago. On the side of my company, 1 month before I joined it, they spent £30 million on a brand new printing press that even at my current circulation levels is unlikely to pay back its investment before another 10 or 15 years. And it takes a brave shareholder to decide that's a good use of the money. I would not have made that decision if I was running that board. Now I am running that board. The opportunities that are sitting in front of me are fantastic. And if we follow, I would believe, 4 simple rules, then for those of us that are excited about the new world, but are also making a current living out of the old world, there is enormous opportunity, but to make sure that we don't ignore the 90%. If you are chasing too much of the 10%, then your 90 will fall a lot quicker. And you will maybe still end up with your 10% of digital revenue, but your 90 will be half or a quarter of the size. It is not rocket science, and there are many more qualified people who will show you some amazing statistics today to talk about the real thrill that is migrating from offline to online. But if you follow 4 simple rules, then I think little can go wrong. Do not cannibalize your old business. My company, DC Thomson, had a very unusual digital strategy for the last 15 years. They were hoping that the internet would go away. For me, as a publisher who was laughing from the outside, I am now joining a company that's made up of a £220 million magazine business and a £70 million newspaper business. So my newspaper business makes about £32 million from circulation revenue, about £33 million from advertising revenue. And I joined it laughing like you that 18 months ago they had no digital strategy but to hope the internet goes away. Well, my privilege is now taking very, very successful newspapers. They are struggling, but they are struggling slower than any other newspaper brand, especially my ones in the north of Scotland. And I have the opportunity of taking the best from the internet, but not having suffered from the worst, because they have not given anything away free. We are internet virgins, but in a land where there is so much prospecting gone on, I can choose what I hope is the right digital strategy. If you are not too late, be very, very careful. Most regional newspaper publishers or national newspaper publishers, many of which are friends and colleagues in this room or from around the world, can migrate up to 15% of their advertising money online. So in a year's time, in 2 years' time, I could maybe turn my £30 million advertising money and make another £5 million by prospecting my content digitally, which will be exciting to go and get £5 million. But if I'm chasing £5 million at the expense of my £70 million, I have just self-harmed. We are not a televisual business. We shouldn't pretend that we're a televisual business. We want to migrate and prospect in these areas. But until we decide that we want to invest in companies that are televisual, we need to recognize that translating an essentially print experience online as a straightforward PDF through Apple's newsstand is something that is worth doing, because everybody else's, the barriers to entry are fairly low, and it seems silly not to offer those that want to squeeze in or squeeze out of page content the opportunity of doing so. But to enthusiastically offer all your content, especially with newspapers, online, is a genie that once is out the bottle will never get in. So rule number 1, do not cannibalize your old business. Rule number 2, be brilliant. If you're going to do something, go and do it fantastically, or do not bother doing it at all. There is too much good stuff out there for you to be average, and all you will do is waste the opportunity cost of defending the old world by prospecting the new. Unless it is brilliant, do not touch it. To try and chase something because it seems a good idea and everybody else is doing it before you truly understand it is utterly stupid. So either be fabulous or don't bother at all. It is exactly the same advice that my wife has given me with sex. The third important rule is simple. Innovate. Be brave and try to innovate in 2 different ways. Way number 1, innovate with your existing model. For me, to move to America for the last couple of years, to move away from distribution, away from wholesale, away from publishing, away from print media, and then come back fresh is magnificent. Because I've looked at an industry that the volume terms in Europe, since I went away for 2 years, or 3 years in fact, the volume of print sales in Europe have gone down, you know the figures, by 17%. The volume figures in the UK have gone down by, in my view, 18%. The industry differs to me slightly, in just 3 years. So I can come back afresh and say that my cost base is not radically different. So I am looking at my business that hasn't really changed, it's evolved rather than revolutionized, and I've used it as an opportunity of saying, I'm not going to defend what my British Airways used to be like. I need to become an EasyJet. I still do the same basic job of offering good value, safe, efficient transport from one city to another. But I must be radical and innovative in the way that I dispassionately look at my balance sheet, look at my profitability, look at what I outsource, and concentrate on the things that I'm good at. The things that I'm good at, I need to be brilliant at. The things that I don't have to do, I should not do. I should give it to other people to do. So not only innovate with your existing cost base and your existing management and your existing way of doing things, but innovate in the way that you prospect with the new role as well. Many people are sitting with balance sheets, with media brands, print media brands that are worth many, many millions of pounds or euros. Of course they are, and they're very excited about the potential value of those online. But innovating doesn't mean to say you have to work with a whole load of technology people to make it right. You do not. Innovating might be in the business. Innovating might be that you give your brand to somebody that you do not know exists today, but tomorrow could make your brand incredibly successful because they have the audiences, they have the technology, they have the expertise, but most importantly, they have the management culture to understand how to unlock the power of offline brands and move them online because they are of the online world. So being brave, not only in your existing business, but how you partner with other businesses is critical. And my last piece of advice is to take part in it yourself. It is easy to attend conferences like this. It is easy to attend meetings in your boardroom and to talk the talk. It is magnificent, and you feel liberated like you are coming out to your parents for the first time in your life when you sit there in front of your younger employees and you talk about the fact that you understand what the tweeting stats are, you talk about understanding the business model of Newsstand. You're terribly excited because you have 3 friends in on LinkedIn. You need to really immerse yourself in the digital revolution by becoming an actual consumer of it much, much more than you are. I was ashamed and appalled to be mixing with editors and journalists that thought they understood the use of media brands in our kids' and in our peer group, and in many cases in our parents. But they don't really understand it, they just think they do. And I'm sure it is exactly the same in this room. And there is not anybody in this room that is spending as much time as there should, not anybody, in really getting under the skin of how these brands are being used and consumed. You have to kiss a lot of frogs, and many of them still turn into frogs. You have to, and that wasn't in no way a xenophobic European statement for the record. But you will still waste time looking at websites and looking at media models that you don't truly understand and may well not get anywhere. But to understand it from a PowerPoint document, from Nielsen trends, or from exhibition stands is not to really understand it. You need to live it and breathe it. My 15-year-old daughter will almost certainly never read a newspaper or a magazine. My 8-year-old son will definitely never read a newspaper and probably won't read a magazine. If you listen to his teachers, he may well never read at all, but the same principle is entirely true. Now, that doesn't mean to say, as I said, that we will not still have successful, powerful media brands, many of which will be making massive margins for some decades to come in print. But unless we understand how to protect the existing and move into the new properly, then we are really paying lip service to this thing. It is an exciting and thrilling time for us. But if you are treating this place like your predecessor did, like you're a caretaker, then you will fail. We are the generation of people that will somehow hand our business to the next generation of management in better shape, or we will fail. It is a time for excitement, it is a time for optimism, but only if you listen to reality and you absorb and take part of it. You have been magnificently attentive. I'm extremely grateful for your welcome. I wish you a very successful conference, and enjoy the rest of your dogging. Thank you very much indeed. Good morning.
Ellis Watson, ladies and gentlemen.